Well, it's 12 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Solarity's live community discussion series, which we do every Thursday for the community. In these changing times, we want to engage in discussions with other folks who are dealing with a lot of the same things, talk about how everyone's dealing with the new normal. We're better together, and so every week we talk with people from different industries. This week we're going to be talking with Bert and Sue, and we have the Bluegrass PMI chapter and other PMI chapters joining us because this is an event that not only engages us in communication, talks about tools that can help any organization get back to work more effectively, but it also, for project managers, provides some continuing education in the form of professional development units. So welcome everyone today. We're also glad to welcome some of our partners from the Kentucky League of Cities who do such great work as well. Our presenters today are Bert Walther, an Executive Project Manager with Solarity, and Sue Knies, our Practices Management Director at Solarity. They're going to be sharing more information about communication on projects, and we're all doing projects these days with adapting to working from different locations, dealing with new client needs, getting back to work in a healthy way. So we're talking about how Microsoft Teams can enable that communication and enable managing projects more effectively to get to our new abnormal, as it were. So I'm going to turn it over to Bert and Sue. Bert, take it away.
Thank you, Bud. It's a privilege to be here today. And we're excited about giving this presentation. This is part of our webinar series that we've been working on. And if you've been on the webinars before, you'll remember this kind of meter that we're working with here, because you've got this remote work transformation model that we identified fairly early on. And we are able to work with, somewhere in between conquering dysfunction and moving over to transforming how we operate. So we really want to work with, at least delivering essential responsibilities and adapting processes. Now, this is a continuum, and there are days that we will be adapting processes and transforming, and there are days that we will realize that we do not have what we need, and we're actually end up with the fact that there is some dysfunction, that we thought we had functionality and we don't have it anymore. We really focus in on people, processes, and tools, and how those things are going to all be delivered as we work with all of this. How are our people going to adapt to this? How are we going to adapt our tools? And what changes do we need to make to our processes as we go through? I want to start out, as many projects do, with a little bit of an asterisk. If you looked at the name, there is an asterisk at the end of the title, and that is because there is a lessons learned that we have to talk about today. We are talking about adding technology into business processes. If the business process is not working, if it's not functioning as it needs to be, technology will only make that worse. I guess the same could be said about human behavior. So much of our business processes have to do with human behavior. So if there are behavioral problems that you're dealing with, adding technology in will not solve those problems. It'll only make them worse. And this is a lesson that I think both Sue and I have learned over the years. So it's a pretty amazing moment to be able to kind of stand in this and say, we've got to add technology. So how do we make sure that our business processes and our behavioral and attitudes and rituals that we have in our work are functioning to do this? When we began to talk about all of this, we really ended up with me needing to go back and kind of reset myself. When I went to talk to Sue about all of this, what happened was that there is, I needed to go back and review what is effective, efficient communication for a project. I know it because I kind of intuit it, because I do it by muscle memory. I know when to do some walking around. I can kind of judge what's happening. I know when to stop by somebody's office and get the update. I know when to, if I haven't heard anything by this time on Thursday afternoon, I know that that's a clue. Hey, I need to go remind them that this work needs to get done. But all of those cues are gone. And so I had to go back and kind of build this from the bottom up. The other thing that I spent some time doing, and we've discussed a lot internally, is adding to that from our hybrid and agile ideas. You know, this is not done in the vacuum. These have been, we've been talking about an agile philosophy to doing projects. We've been talking about how to really manage everything that needs to go on in maybe a hybrid way. And what I found in the Agile Practice Guide are a couple of things about team workspaces, which I think is what we're talking about today. When we can't get to the conference rooms that we're in, we can't get to the whiteboards, we can't get to the spaces that remember our brainstorming and all the other meetings that we've had, how can we set up space to do that when we're not co-located together? As Sue would say, is when we're not in a tight matrix. It's one of the words that I remember from studying for my PMP exam. The other model that came up was servant leadership, and you know, from the agile mindset, and it's really that move from managing coordination to facilitating coordination. I'm finding that I'm spending a lot of my time really working with making sure that people have what they need, that they, you know, on the Maslow hierarchy of needs, that they know that everything at the base of that triangle is being met, so that they are able to work. I also know that that's a variable scale. You know, we've had situations where, you know, somebody's working along just fine, and then a couple of days later, they find out that their spouse has lost their job and they're going to be furloughed. And so what does that mean? You know, all of a sudden we go way down in that hierarchy of needs. And so we have to facilitate and work with our people to make sure that they have everything that they need. Added on to this, then, I found a wonderful publication by Microsoft and IDEO about the art of teamwork. And there are a lot of good business case studies in here and how this is applied, but what stuck out to me were some of these graphics. These are two of the graphics that we have here. All of us are still charged with taking complex challenges and producing positive outcomes. Now we have to do it in an environment that we virtually have to agree on what our team purpose is, and we have to create that environment where there's going to be this constructive tension where we can all be heard, we can utilize each other's strengths, we can cover each other's weaknesses, we can have that trust and vulnerability needed to accomplish great work. As most of you know, whether that's in project management or other work teams that you're working on, we really are always moving from abstract to tangible. And it's the fact that we can build up shared values, that we can all begin to understand what are the agreements of how we're going to get work done. And you'll see some of those examples as we go through this today. Most importantly, though, that came out, and what we've talked about most internally at Solarity, is the importance of these rituals. You know, you had the coffee, you know, the coffee maker, the cooler that everybody comes to. You have the whiteboard that people stand in front of. You have the 5 or 10 minutes before the big meeting where you could share things. So what are your rituals and what's right for your team? Some of that will be daily check-ins. Some of that will be weekly check-ins. Some of that will be at a different cadence yet from that. But it's really important for us to establish those rituals as we go forward. As we began to kind of tackle this idea, I'd go and sit in Sue's office before we had to socially distance, and we'd talk about this, and I'd say, okay, Sue, so how would we change our project management process? For those of you who don't know, one of the things that Solarity has is a very complete project process framework and practice framework for what we do. And so what I'd like to do now is maybe turn it over to Sue to talk for a little bit on how we adjusted that framework to fit this moment that we're in, to meet what our customers are asking for, and everything else to really be able to do more than thrive, but kind of to adapt our processes and transform, if you think about that indicator that we have. So Sue, tell us about the project life cycle that we drafted for this.
Thanks, Bert. Appreciate the time, and hopefully it will be of value. Being a consulting company, we at Solarity have to develop, as Bert alluded to, various types of project life cycles or methods to fit the needs of the projects we manage. And with the going back to work and the recent challenges we've had, we were also tasked with the fact that we need to come up with something that is workable, but still meets the needs of organizations and teams to get back to work in the best way possible. So up in the top right-hand corner it's up to the project management team to determine the best life cycle. And we found that we needed to right size our methodology and our life cycle to help us to be more agile. And agile really means, can we move things out in an iterative way? It's not just about IT, it's about any industry. Do we have to wait until everything is developed, or can we iteratively roll things out, policies, procedures, processes, and still do it in a methodical way? The guidelines we stand firm on is that we should standardize a methodology or life cycle, simplify that life cycle, and then and only then, as Bert alluded to, is to apply the appropriate tools. At the top of the chart, you see a long horizontal line there that says updated PMIS. PMIS is Project Management Information System. And so what it alludes to is the process below it talks about the people and talks about the order in which you would do things. But then depending on the tools that you have, you can fit the tools based on your specific needs. So those of you who might be business analysts on the call, you might notice this is kind of looking like a process mapping chart. And it sort of is, but it's based on deliverables. We feel these are the basic deliverables that a smaller project should undertake. And what you can do is in a planning phase, you would go through producing these deliverables. And then in the execute, we have a second phase. You could iteratively, if you need to, produce those deliverables, and then fund and close the project. So again, this methodology not only fits an IT shop, but it also is adaptable to any business unit. And we're going to move forward now with kind of using teams as a way to use a tool to support this process. Back to you, Bert.
Great. Just a couple of things. I have turned off my video. Apparently, there may be a little bit of trouble with my internet connection. Again, we go adapting and transforming how we work all the way down to dysfunction. That's a good example of how internet can come in and out. And Sue, you alluded to something here at the last moment about the using Teams. I'd remind everybody that we are using Teams because that seems to be a solution that we are looking at and a lot of our customers are looking at. I think that that's mostly driven by the fact that it exists in many organizations and they feel like it's underutilized on the one hand, and on the other hand, they don't have a whole lot of extra cash sitting around to go out and buy a new system just to make sure that their work groups or their projects or their programs can move forward. And so we want to make sure that we have you know, a model for doing this. And again, we're using Teams because that fits us. There are people in this audience that are much more intelligent and more clever than I am. And I'm sure that this can be extrapolated to be used with any number of services out there, like ecologies out there, like Teams. So we'll go ahead and let you work on that, and we'd be interested to be in that conversation too. As we move forward, then, whoops, I think I went too far on that one. There we go. We have a poll that's up there. It is pollev.com, the Solarity Group. Solarity Group 311. The link should be coming up in the chat. I believe Bud's going to put that in there, but you can type that in. You can also vote from your phone for your favorite idea here. And I am looking for, we're really looking for people that in D. I'm the boss in Teams. They should have asked me to do the presentation because I have a lot to learn and I want to identify people I can learn from. So I'll give you just a couple minutes here and we can go ahead and then review all the results. We'll wait for them to come in. I think we should have had Jeopardy music or something going on during this time.
Got some bosses coming in.
Who's whistling in the background? That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm helping out there.
We should have you set up your guitar and, you know, mic and everything.
Some people are choosing D to make you feel better, Bert.
There you go. No, I'm sure there are people out there that know much more about Teams than I do.
Thank you, Jenna. Good.
We'll give everybody just another few seconds here and we'll kind of move forward. But you can see, this is what I expected. Most people are more than aware of Teams. There are a few people who this will be a first foray into it. That's fine. I'll go ahead and we'll talk through that and kind of orient you. And then we're going to spend a number of slides really getting you oriented to what's going on and also looking at how we can apply the features, at least the core features in Teams to do this. So thanks for your responses. We're gonna move on here into the rest of the presentation just to make sure that we're all talking about in the same pane of glass, since it's not a sheet of paper anymore. We're in the same pane of glass on this one. Microsoft Teams is a hub, and it works and interacts with all of the other applications that Microsoft has, including, it also has the ability to include other applications from outside. So you can use this to utilize meetings and calling folks. It does not even have to have a phone number associated with it, although that is what some tenants do. It is an extra cost, but you can do call-ins as we do, we do for certain meetings, but you can just use it internally for meetings. You can use it for chat and collaboration and apps and workflow. Now, we're not going to get to the last part of this because we learned a lesson very quickly with doing all this. We needed to start simply, and we need to start with a simple solution and kind of move forward in that. Just to get you a little bit further oriented to what's going on here, here are all the parts. There are too many parts for us to go through. The good news about this is that there is a link that you can go to and get this quick start guide and use it. Now, if you were in C and you're not only using it, but you're encouraging other people to use it as well, because it's a tool that's in your network and in your enterprise, and it can be valuable to the work that you're doing, I encourage you to download this and use it as a quick start guide with those who you are coaching to move along through this, or for new project members that are project team members that are coming on that may not have quite the familiarity to it. But this is a really good resource. Microsoft has many quick start guides, but for now we're just going to focus on the remote work through Teams. We had to apply an idea, so we figured the best way to apply an idea was to actually build a team in Microsoft Teams. And the goal of this team, and this is where Sue comes in and really keeps me honest. She's like, well, what's the goal of the team? What are we going to do with it? Well, we're going to confirm that all the essential aspects of a day in the life of a project team using MS Teams as a PMIS would be addressed. I don't think I can promise you that we have not explored every aspect of it. I can think of 2 or 3 right now that we will continue to progress in. But we also have this idea that I think we've hit the 80% that are core to what we're going to do here today. So, it won't be exhaustive, but I think it'll give us a really good start at it. When you land in Teams, when you set up a team, and you can see over on the side, we're going to be using this one that was actually set up for another PMI group, the KI, Kentuckiana Project Management group. So we've kind of set up this team, and it gives you a landing page of posts that you can go to. Now, the posts is really the central point for team communication, file sharing, conversations, check-in, anything else like that. Immediately we came to the idea that, there has to be something, if you do a RACI chart on your PMIS, who is accountable for this? And it has to be the project manager. And so
Bert, just a quick question, because I think we're using some shop talk here a little bit.
Okay, good.
RACI chart.
A RACI, yes. A RACI chart is who's responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be informed. Who needs to be kept in it to keep it going on. A lot of our people just need to know that this work is going on, and so they'd only be informed. But the accountable person is really the one at the end of the day that has to take charge of doing this. They can delegate it to somebody, but they have to ultimately their name's on the line for what's going on there. And the principal activity that whoever's going to own this, whether it's a project manager, whether it's a team lead, whether it's anything like that, I think the skill that we have not had to work with as intentionally in business is curation. This is a tool that requires us to make sure that the information that we're putting into this tool is in the right place so that we can find it. There are a lot of different channels for communication, but we're going to spend time curating it. Because we have the posts and we were working with the project management, we decided that we could take a form like our project charter. It's a template that we use to make sure we have clarity on what our description is, what the scope is, what our deliverables are, what a high-level milestones and schedule is for the work that we're doing, what needs to be delivered, the key deliverables. To establish value and benefit in the organization. And what I decided to do was, we need to have this out in this main section so it's very easy for people to get to. Now, as time goes on, this will be at the top of the stream, so you can always come back up to the top and review it with people. But we decided that as we were bringing project team members on, what we'd want to do is make sure that all of that is very clear at the very beginning.
So Bert, this is Sue. This tends to be an IT kind of set of milestones. In lieu of going back to work, I suppose that if a company needed to lay out a plan to say this is the order in which we need to plan our strategy, develop our policies, train our people, and so forth. It would look much the same, but it wouldn't take on the IT slant.
Absolutely. And you could say, well, we know that we have to have these 10 checklists done before we can go back in to work. And we know that they have to be, everybody's got to be trained on those checklists. My daughters are beginning to go back to work in their jobs. And the first thing that they have to do is they have to go to an orientation. So, that orientation would be something that's scheduled on this milestone here. That's great. Great way to think about it, Sue. And I really like it. Now, I kind of got down the road just a minute. I want to go back for just a minute. I want to talk to you about what's on the screen here. If you go all the way over to the left, you've got a column that starts with a bell, and it has a little icon for a chat and a calendar. That's kind of where you are in all of this. We are clicked on the teams, and that's the list of teams that you have. You will see each one of these later on. I guess we won't go through into calling, but you'll see most of these later on and be able to see what those screens look like. Up at the very top of the screen then, next to where it says general, and that's a channel in here, are the place like posts, files, wiki, notebook, dashboard. We will talk through all of these things. This is what's unique to the team and where we keep the content to the team, and we're able to organize the work that we're doing and the files that we need and everything else. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to have to go over and find this share and get this file out, and I don't want to have to go over here and check my Outlook and check when the meetings are, and I don't need to, find that the notes from the last meeting, and by the way, where did we actually file that document? I know you all have none of these problems. You all run a pristine shop, but we spend a lot of time trying to, curate and get better at cleaning as we go. Because I've got my daughters at home. That's been a kind of a theme. You're coming home to live, so we're going to clean as we go and not have a big mess to clean up later on. But I digress. So let's move back here then, because once you talk about the posts, we really need to begin to talk about how that applies to the project, how this tool is going to apply to the project life cycle that we have put together. Sue, you want to come back in and kind of talk through this with us?
Sure. One of the key things for a project manager, project leader, whatever that title is good communication, the theme of this. And so a good thing to do is to come up with a communications plan. And that it basically means what am I needing to send in terms of messaging or deliverables? Who do they need to go to? Who's responsible for them? And what we've done is we've taken each of these deliverables off of this simple process. And actually, if you'll advance there, Bert. We've developed a communications plan actually to go with each one of these deliverables. And again, depending on the nature of your project, you can expand or modify this according to your needs. So it would have an objective of why you need it and how often it would go out and basically when it would go out. So we developed this as basically a starter for project leads to be able to get their communications plan up and running.
Yeah. And if you're not doing a formal project with teams and you're trying to organize a work group, it's always good to kind of formalize what type of communication is necessary for my work group to have to make sure that they're informed and can be able to work and understand why they're doing the work that they're doing. And so taking a minute and saying, well, you know, we need to have a call once a week, and we need to sit down and make sure that I have a touch point with each one of the people on my team. That we need to make sure that there's kind of a summary email about how what the plans are so far for the company to move forward with continuing to open up, and how operations will continue to transform as we move through this. So being intentional about writing this out is always a good exercise. A lot of times we don't take time to do those things that are best for us. We tend to get distracted and pulled into the urgent. But this is one of those times where we've said, okay, it's important, and we have to go back here and do what's important, even though there are a lot of urgent things that are kind of clamoring for our time. Now, we've talked a little bit about the posts being the landing page for everything in Teams. We've talked about the importance of communication. I want to advance next to the chat function, and that's the second one on the left-hand side. And chat is an area where I spend most of my time. We kind of dip in as we need to, and it's sort of like shouting over the cubicle wall to say, "Hey, did you see this email?" Since we're not present with one another, what we need to do is we have a space here that I can just reach out and talk with Sue like I've been doing with this one. Now, if this conversation gets going and I feel like I'm spending too much time typing or I want to begin to look at a file, I have the option up in the upper right-hand corner of going to a phone call, or I can go to a video share, or I can share a file on my screen so that we can all be working with this. If you go over to the next to last icon, I can even say, okay, Sue and I are talking about this. We need Bud to make a decision on this. So we're going to include Bud in this conversation. We're going to bring him into what's going on, whether that's the chat, whether that's the phone call, whether that's the share, whether that's a video meeting. We bring him in. Now, this is what I call the power of now in Teams. It may have taken us in the office, right? Sue and I are talking about something. Bud's off doing what he needs to do. He's not going to be back till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We're doing this in the morning. It's going to take us 5 hours to get this in front of him for him to make a decision. Because we've got this power of now, we can bring Bud in, and in 45 minutes, we can actually gain back 4 or 5 hours of just wait time. And so, you know, the duration of what we have to do can be shrunk, and we can actually use this to move the business forward. This is one of the things that I think as we transform, this is an area that I think many businesses in many different scenarios will actually gain benefit from. The old ways, the habitual ways of communicating with one another are being interrupted. So how can we get better at that? How can we move at the speed of business that it demands right now? And that's really this whole part of the slide here is focusing on that.
And Bert, this is Bud. Just to that point, it saves a lot of meetings too, where we have to get together. So that approval could be a quick chat, and I on my phone can respond back while I'm waiting for another meeting. Certainly not when I'm driving, but it's a lot easier and faster to be able to respond and get things going.
Absolutely. And so we have to challenge each other. You know, do we really need a meeting for this, or can this be done in a chat, right? The next area is where we keep our files, and everybody that I know deals with how do we house the documentation that we need? It doesn't matter whether you're working on a formal project or not, you need to keep the files. The other thing that I know is finding the document after you file it someplace is priceless. And so while you can have this area, you have a file area, and you can see here what we did was we kind of aligned it with, here's the background of what we're working on, here's the initiate and plan, here's the execute, monitor, and control and close. Those are all project terms for what's going on there. There's also this methodology, an area where we want to keep people up to speed on the evolving methodology. So we put in these are articles and things that we want to share. There are some files that I don't want nested anywhere. I want to be able to get to them. And the one that I usually go to is a stakeholder register. Who has a stake in the work that we're doing? And so I want to keep that to where I can get to that very quickly. This is all great. And Teams is a wonderful tool, but it's still is in the development phase. This is an evergreen tool from Microsoft, as most of their software is right now, which means they're continually adding features to this. They're expanding the capabilities of this. So what can happen here is that I don't necessarily have as an easy way to manipulate and administrate all the files. The good news is, as we talked about earlier, all of this is based on SharePoint. When you stand up a Teams, you actually open up a SharePoint site. Now, if you have a team that is named the same as a work group, right? Revenue reports, maybe we do one on revenue reports, and we already have a SharePoint site called revenue reports. It will actually stand up a separate revenue reports, and you can actually lose documents there. So you need to make sure that you understand this is a separate SharePoint site. If you want to include a SharePoint site, we're going to talk about how you can do that later on, that already exists. But the one that you spin up for the team will not necessarily be where all of these documents go, right? There's also, I think, some leverage in SharePoint that we're going to talk about later on that allows us to get to some other advanced features, especially when you get into project, program, and portfolio management that are important.
And Bert, a comment there, back on posts, you have the ability to attach files in a post, but it doesn't know which folder to go to. So when you do that, it lands in this root directory. So we get back to curate and putting it in the proper folder and managing and organizing accordingly.
Absolutely. Yeah, when we do collaborate on documents outside of this space, or and just in posts, like you said, it just goes back here generally. So again, curate. This is the thing we've got to clean as we go, or it will just get out of sync, and we won't be able to find anything that we have.
Hey, Bert.
Yes.
One question that came up is the cost of Microsoft Teams. So could you speak to the fact that it's available, its availability?
It is available. You can get the free download to participate with limited functionality. Teams does come, I believe, with the Enterprise 3 license and above, but you can buy that. To be honest with you, it's too complicated to get into here. I'd love to spend time on this. But what we can do is we can facilitate a conversation with Microsoft if you need to, or you can get a hold of your Microsoft rep, and they'll be able to tell you what's available.
Yeah, the point there is a free version that does chat, online meetings, video calling, team and personal file storage, and then collaboration. So that file functionality is available in the free version. So just want folks to know that that was not a hurdle if cost was a consideration.
Yep. So it's all there, but it gets very complicated, and it changes some over time. So if you want to have a conversation about that, be more than happy. You can reach out to me later on, and we can talk through some of that. Good. I think we're done with files, and I want to move on then to we're going to skip one, and we're going to go over to what's called a wiki. I don't know how many people are familiar with wikis. I began to learn about wikis in I think the late 90s, early 2000s, as we were working with it. A wiki is basically, it's kind of funny in my mind that Microsoft has included it here because some of you may remember Microsoft Encarta, which was the great encyclopedia that Microsoft was going to put together for the computer. It launched just about the same time as Wikipedia. And as you know, Wikipedia is still around, and it's growing and it's thriving, and it's been translated into all kinds of different languages, and you cannot buy a copy of Microsoft Encarta. That speaks to a mentality where, you know, a lot of people doing a little bit of work at a time can really produce a great product. But it was kind of outside of the mindset of Microsoft at the time. It's fascinating to me that they've brought it back in now and they're using it. Where I think that it works really well is to remind people, on the one hand, to remind people of what we're doing and why we're doing it. We're kind of going back to this team purpose. I find in the work that I'm responsible for, what will happen is we have an issue come up, we come up with some great ideas, we have some great discussions, we start to extend those discussions a little bit, and then we're looking for a cure to COVID. And that just doesn't work very well. You have to come back over, you have to focus yourself up. Why are we doing this work? What are the deliverables that we're kind of coming out on? And we have to reset ourselves. And so I use the wiki here as a way to provide our guiding principles and our team purpose. I also use it as we did on the, you saw on the front page of posts to the team. Here's the purpose, scope, and objectives. Here are the milestones, schedule, and overview. And here are some key documents that you need to have. This is a great place to kind of put together a catalog of the things that your team needs to be working with all at once. So you don't have to remember which folder is it in. Where is it all at? It's in the wiki. You can just go in and click on the document that you need. Now, that comes from curation. Curation is not merely just cleaning up, but it's properly categorizing it and publishing it so that other people can find it very quickly. So that's the other piece of curation. Everybody's responsible for curation. We're going to talk in just a couple minutes here about some things that are going on. If we go back to chat, for instance, if something happens in the chat, it's got to be curated back into the project, because the chat and the project not directly connected. So somebody's got to take this information back in. But the strength of this tool is that it provides this environment where, if we're intentional about what we do and we kind of have a clean slate to do it, we always tell ourselves, if I could do it right the first time, I would. This is the environment where you can do it in. And so you've got to have that functionality to work with all of this. And this discipline and behavior. So like I said, technology doesn't make behavior better, it doesn't make processes better, actually probably makes bad processes worse. But the discipline of doing this is what we need to get to. The next thing I want to talk about is probably near and dear to more of your hearts than even SharePoint is, and that's OneNote. Sue, you want to kind of walk through how we use OneNote?
Sure. OneNote is actually a part of Teams. Just like in the back end you have SharePoint, you also have the ability to get to OneNote. And for those who've used OneNote, it's really a cool tool. We primarily use it to organize project meetings and develop project status reports, which is the example showing here. So no matter what type of project you're working on, whether it's an IT project or, again, back to work, you normally have to report status out to someone, right? Executives above, line management, and so forth. And so we have a template that we have built here that basically tells you in red, yellow, green if your schedule's on, if your budget's on, if your deliverables are being delivered on time. You reflect the milestones and deliverables that you got at the beginning of the project, and you can report, this is what we accomplished this period, and what do we plan to do in the next period before I come back and provide status. And then on the bottom of the page, we actually, for smaller, succinct projects, keep issues and risks and any change requests or lessons learned and key decisions resident on this project status report. Those of you who are seasoned project managers know that if you have huge projects, then you probably need to keep a separate issues log. And you see here we provide a link to that log where you can keep it outside or a risk register. But succinct projects that need to be self-contained and can be done in that way, we find has all consolidated in one status report is wonderful. Status reports in OneNote can be exported in PDF format, and LinkedIn are attached in emails if people can't get to them within Teams. So it provides a nice way to move things in and out. Back to you, Bert.
Yeah. So there's some wonderful things. Another one of the functionalities you'll see up here, dashboard is not one of the default tabs. This is a tab that we created because we were using for the project that we're highlighting here, another piece of software, and we wanted to bring in a dashboard. Now you can do this with Microsoft BI. You can do this with any number of other projects, softwares that are out there. You can even bring in, this is where you would add in a SharePoint site. You can actually create a tab that says, work group SharePoint site, and put it up here at the top so that you have it and you can just get to it. The idea here, though, is that you've got the hub of all of the information that you're looking at and need to look at when you're having a discussion, you're in a meeting, you're preparing for something, you're just trying to get work done. But this, this particular tab allows us to actually bring in a third-party software that many of us are dependent upon for the work that we do, and actually utilize it within the Microsoft environment. And that's a fair amount of the strength coming into this.
So Bert,
yeah.
This could also be something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet or even a Google Doc, right? If you wanted to mix and match.
Yes, you can. I mean, if there's a file that you're all working off of and you know that you're going to be in it and that's where everything's contained, it can be as simple as a Word document that you all are working through.
I suppose going back to work with COVID, you could actually put links to appropriate government documents or portals, the portal that would drive you to regulations and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yep. If there was an interactive map that you all were watching or some kind of a infographic like that, that could also be included in this area. And again, you can organize these in whatever order that you want to. I've not found a great way to reset posts from being the landing page. So you would have to intentionally move to another one of these tabs. I think that's the only thing that I would really like to see Microsoft add on fairly quickly, is the ability to set one of these as the landing page that you want for whatever work that you're doing. But that's there. The last thing I want to I guess it's not the last thing, because I always want to talk about something. But the next thing that I want to talk about are schedules and tasks. We all are responsible to deliver work by a certain time, and that has to be broken down into tasks so that people can get them done. This is actually an app that's added in called Microsoft Planner. If you have E3 and above, you can get to this without a problem. Is it available in E1? Do you know, Bud? I did not check that before I came in.
I believe so, but I'll double check while you're talking.
Okay, great. So Planner may be available to anybody who's using it, because it really is kind of this scheduling piece for what's happening. But what you have here is the board view, and it really works with this idea of the Kanban board functionality. It's the tasks that need to be done, the ones that are in process of being done, and the ones that are completed. One of the things that I've found during this time when we're all kind of scattered is you can hide the completed tasks, as you can see on the screen there, but I usually keep them unhidden because there's a morale boost to know that members of the team are continually accomplishing, completing things to get to the end of the work that we need to do. So we need to look for those little ways. This is about facilitating the work, right? We're telling people all of these folks are getting stuff done. Mary's not home, on the couch in her bunny slippers, eating bonbons while the rest of the team is working, right? But people are getting work done. And if something's not getting done, then that, as a person who's responsible for supervising and completing work, you can actually, kind of use this as a quick checkpoint for what's going on there. There's also a need for the more traditional calendar view. We're going to be doing this work from the 11th to the 29th. So we better be very careful about what other things we schedule during that time. and how we're going to get it done, because resources may be used, people may be used within that project to not be able to complete additional work. So we do have this kind of schedule view, and at the same time we could drop down. I didn't do it for clarity, but you could drop down and see your to-dos, your in progress, your completed, as we kind of look at the screen there. So this is two of the views. Go ahead.
This is Sue. I was going to say, and depending on the complexity of your project, your schedule could take you out to Microsoft Project, or if it's very straightforward and you manage projects through an Excel spreadsheet, you can put the link there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really good area to get this to work on this. Now, when you think about schedules, what I usually end up thinking about is this schedule. Now, the calendar in Teams is actually mapped back to your Outlook calendar. At this point in time, it's only your primary Outlook calendar. So if I'm used to pulling up Sue and Bud's calendar to see whether they've got time to meet, I can't do that in Teams yet. I expect that functionality will come along in the next few months, but I can't guarantee when it's going to be there. So we begin to look at what can I do in my schedule. When you open up one of these meetings, what you get is this is the meeting from Monday, the team huddle check-in. You get some basic information, and you get immediately how to join that meeting. There are also areas in here like you can pull off and do a chat on the side while people are talking live. You can share files. You can put in meeting notes. There's even a whiteboard that you can use. Again, the kind of stick to all of this is it's not tied back directly to a work group or a project. So if you're going to include anything, somebody needs to be designated here to say at the end of the meeting, okay, who's got the whiteboard, who's got the meeting notes, who's got the files, to make sure that they get back into the right area and they're curated. There is still some intentionality. I would love to see them integrate it more, but that has not boiled up to the top for Microsoft yet as we're doing this work. The other option that you have, though, is if it just looks clear like it does on some of my days, and I promise you, this is not really my schedule, you can actually just click the button and meet now. So you can schedule a meeting on the fly and invite people to it. It does not have to be something that's in the future. You can schedule a meeting for this moment and move forward. And that's a fair amount. Now, this has kind of taken us through again, those kind of core functionality of Teams. We've been able to look at our posts. We've been able to look at the chat. We've looked at the various pieces like schedule and files and the wiki and how we can get all the other work done in this. One of the questions that comes up when I'm working with other clients is, okay, so what was it really like for Solarity to adopt Teams? And to be truthful, we had the same bumps and bruises, right? We were in the middle of this conversation about an agile and hybrid mindset. And this is almost a year ago now, maybe 9 months, somewhere between 9 months and a year ago, that we were really kind of stepping into this. A new tool was introduced. That meant we have the normal responses. Some people were really, really giddy. I get a new tool to play with. Other people were just kind of blue and sad that they have yet another tool to deal with. Some people were agitated because they had yet another tool to deal with, something else to integrate into their schedule. We kind of struggled through that, as all teams and companies do as you do the work. The good news is that we were able to turn to the Louisville Microsoft Users Group, LUMUG, and the Central Kentucky Microsoft Users Group, and they are having sessions now on a regular basis about Teams and how to use Teams. So I encourage you to be a part of that conversation if you want to know more. I can get you in touch with the folks that run both of those, but you can sign up. I think that Kentucky, the Central Kentucky one was last Tuesday. I think it's like the third, or last Friday. It's the third Friday of the month, and then the fourth Friday of the month is LUMUG. So maybe it's the second Friday of the month for Central Kentucky MUG. But we also had some history that we had to get past, right? A lot of people remember how SharePoint was implemented, and it wasn't a fun memory. So is Teams going to be like SharePoint? I think that that's a kind of a pit of your stomach scare. What governance are, what lessons have we learned from SharePoint? What governance we're going to put around this so it doesn't get out of control? Yeah, so that's something that we're still in the process of tackling. We did have an official internal orientation, and then we worked around with just enough and project management tools and what our customers were looking at in making the just enough project management or PM light practices. And Teams really kind of began to show itself as a candidate because groups like the Bluegrass PMI and Kentuckiana PMI began to ask us, what are you doing with Teams? How are you using Teams? And is there a place for project management there? And that kind of spurred us on to really develop and iterate the project management. And then we all, in March the 13th, what a fun day that is to remember. We have this new normal where we have to do project management, and it began a conversation. That's part of what this session is and what we're doing on every Thursday as we talk about this. Now, though, we've gotten to the place where we can kind of show out what we've been working on and progress this solution because we're working with other groups like Bluegrass PMI today and get their input on it. There are other very high impact middle managers that are out there that are using this tool that we can learn from as well. And that's one of those things that we want to do with this is kind of show out. This is as far as we've gotten. We've still got some plans to go further, but how would what occurs to you that's not occurring to us? How can we make this better? How can we make this a more resilient tool as we're working at all of this? I just want to kind of wrap up with this slide, and then we'll give a couple minutes for Q&A. We did talk about having a standard in the PMBOK and the agile and hybrid mentality of project management that kind of fed this conversation. We did intentionally look at what are the dynamics of teams and what needs to be there. And what things do we need to make sure we're covering in remote work settings? We have the more traditional business analysis look at who's responsible for what, when, and how does the framework of the practice have to happen. We came up with some particular guidelines to that to standardize the methodology, simplify the processes, and apply the appropriate tools. We've got some hints for you, because we've learned some soft lessons along the way, and I'm sure some of these will be more formalized over time. First of all, start simple. You cannot create a complex system and make it work well. Coordinate your naming. If you're calling your work group one thing, call it the same thing in Teams. If you don't have that continuity and nomenclature, what will happen is that the executives won't understand what the frontline people are doing because you have a different vocabulary that you're using. So make sure that there's a consistency so that everybody knows what work you're talking about in the organization. Curation, curation, curation. I've said it. We need to keep going with that and clean as we go. And then the other hint is we've got to break some of our processes and use the power of now in Teams to get work done and to progress the work at the speed that we need to for this moment and this business that we need to be conducting. There are still a lot of challenges out there. We have not, exhausted the features of Teams. The one that jumps to mind is channels. We talked about the general tab. Or general channel. We can also add sub channels underneath of that. So let's say that there's a data channel that you need. You need to do something with data governance. Let's say you need to do something with financials. You can have a channel that's all about financials. If security is a concern for the work that you're doing, you can have a whole area that is just focused on the security that's happening, so that you can kind of keep some clear lanes where things can be discussed. It does take curation to get that done, right? Integrating your financials, how you report time, how you report work that's being done, all the other good things is not simple to do yet. We do not even have full integration with Microsoft Dynamics. So that's something that you'll have to be intentional about. When you get to the idea of working with programs or portfolios of things that you're working on in the organization, there is no clear answer for how you do that with Teams. I have an intuition that because Teams are using SharePoint in the background, that somewhere there is a view that you can use SharePoint to see everything that a program manager, all the work that a program manager will be responsible for in one place, but we haven't found it yet. We're going to have to do some more work on that. And then did I mention, I think curation is going to be the biggest challenge that we have to get through this. It's important that you remember as we're kind of closing up here, Teams is really a front end and a place for integration, a central location for all the other Microsoft apps. We've talked about using Word and Excel and SharePoint and OneNote, and even you can use Project Microsoft Project and other tools like that, even outside applications. But it really is a front end for doing all of this. And so if it's not working for you, or you just can't emotionally get into it that day, you can still go do work in one of these other environments that doesn't take so much mental strain as you're going through this. Most of what we're talking about, especially on the last slide, is about organizational change management. We can talk about technology, we can talk about processes, but this is really, as we go back and we talk about that, first first view that we had, the transition to remote work. How do we adapt and transform what we're doing to get the work done that we need to long term? So with that, I'm going to open it up some more Q&A. I've been seeing the chat kind of run by here, but I haven't taken time to read. What do we have?
Yeah, Bert, one of the questions that came up was, how do you integrate another tool like Smartsheet with Microsoft Teams?
Well, you would add it in as a website, and then it would open up similar to the audit findings that you do, so you can put that in there. I don't think that there's any direct integration or API calls yet, but that is something, that'd be a question for Smartsheet on the one hand, and Microsoft on the other hand, to know whether you could really integrate flows for that.
Thank you.
There is the possibility that you can do more with apps and flows.
Good.
So
another point that I think came up is, we've been talking a lot of project management talk because we have a lot of project management folks on hand, but it's kind of like going to a mechanics convention and talking about how you fix cars and how you get them to have high performance. That really comes down to accomplishing the mission, whatever that mission might be, right? So these days, Bert, it seems like we're having to respond a lot more quickly to changes that are taking place. So I wondered if you could just speak to how Teams can help enable that a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think that you're hitting on it right there. It really is kind of the central to be able to facilitate communication. I think that the key to everything we're doing, I think the work is curation, but the key to everything we're doing is communication and getting the right people in the right conversation at the right moment to move things ahead as much as possible. There is a huge environment to do that in Teams. We've talked about that in chat. We've talked about that in posting to an area. We've talked about that in we didn't talk about calls, but you can hold meetings. But as an overall tool, this really is a great space. We're recording today's session. And it's not in Teams today, but you can record. When you record in Teams, it will actually, if you're logged in remotely, not if you're sitting in a conference room, but if you're logged in remotely, it will actually capture and transcribe what was said when, so that you can go back and see how meetings went. And when an idea came up and why you didn't get there faster, or if, Sue had a stroke of brilliance in our meeting and nobody thought to write it down, we can actually go back and capture it. There are a lot more hidden benefits in here that Microsoft Teams can give to facilitate the speed of business delivery today.
Great, thank you, Bert. And then just one last item that's in the chat for everyone to see, but it comes from Kevin Wallace at CSG. Thank you, Kevin. It's not so much of a question, but for discussion. Starting simple is absolutely a necessity, but expect for folks to adopt quickly and want to expand their usage equally as fast, because users want to drive adoption, think outside the box on how Teams can be expanded with app integrations. Having naming conventions, other governance up front can be challenging, but wise words is essential to growing as pain-free as possible. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We should have him on doing some of this, because there's wisdom there.
Yeah, a little planning up front saves a lot of pain in execution.
Yep.
Good.
Well, I think we're at the end, Bud.
We are.
I hope this was helpful.
Yes, thank you, Bert. Thank you, Sue, for this informative presentation. And we want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. This will be available in recording, so if it was helpful and you think someone else might have interest or find value in this, please feel free to come back to the page, solarity.com/webinars, and there will be a link to this and all the other previous webinars that we have in place. Next week, we're going to have Tim Niddle of Distilled Living talking about how project management practices can help increase the control and speed of reopening distilleries and visitor centers. So I believe Tim is with us. Tim, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, that's that's pretty straightforward. That's what we're going to do.
That's great. We're really looking forward to that, Tim. Your presentations are always informative. And for those of you who don't know, Tim owns Distilled Living, which does a lot of great work around the bourbon industry, and he's doing remote bourbon tasting. So go to distilled-living.com if you want to learn more about that. Well, I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we appreciate your participation. So until next time, it's Solarity Group signing off.
Take care.
Hey, David. Good question. I'm going to unmute you here. So you can get PDUs by going to the continuing education section of PMI. I'm going to go ahead and I'll go ahead and